Shavua Tov, David.
Shavua Tov. I just wanted to confirm that we got up to the Mishnah.
Oh, thank you. I was wondering. I assume so.
I realized that I didn't send an email on Friday, so my apologies for.
No, it's all right. I assume so, but I looked at the last few lines again just in case.
Yeah, no. We got up to the Mishnah. I'm here because I've entertained to see your introduction. So, are you going to give an introduction? What's the plan?
I guess I'm going to give. Now that you said that, I'm going to give an introduction. It's a little tricky because it's not really. The best thing you need is to learn all of Seder Taro.
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen for many reasons. But I'm going to give an introduction. But I guess it might just be you and me, so we'll see.
Yeah, in which case you don't have to bother with the introduction. I mean, I actually have to still finish. I don't know if you've even looked at the notes that I put together.
I did not. I apologize. I didn't.
That's okay. No, there's
I read the email, but I didn't know.
But I'm putting. My goal is to put together ahead of each daf. Basically, there's a website called. What's the website called? Something like Real Easy Daf or something like Real Clear Daf or something. I think that's what it's called, Real Clear.
So you're trying to do this ahead of the daf.
Yes, I'm trying to do this ahead of the daf. So Real Clear Daf is the name of the website. But in any event, so the point is that I'm creating my own version of Real Clear Daf. But the main thing is that I put questions and answers in columns so that if a question's on if it's just question answer, so then it's all going to stay in the same column. But if you have, let's say you have a question and then an answer and then a question on that answer, so then I indent so that it's clear that the question is on the answer and not something that's above. So that's, and I build out that structure to try and help make it a little bit easier to follow.
Got it. So
I welcome any input that you have on it.
Yes, so I'd be happy to. I'll look at it. Are you doing the daf all this week, or what days do you do it?
I do Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, but I'm doing all the daf. I'm doing the summary for everything. I'm doing the daf anyway, so I figure, Rabbi Weiss was like, if you're writing up these summaries, just do every other day, and then you'll have a whole thing. So, of course, that Rabbi Weiss, so that doesn't realize that how much extra work that is. But in any event,
he realizes.
So, in any event, that's.
Miriam, you think we're time to start, or we should give it a couple more minutes? I don't know.
Give it a couple more minutes. Okay. You know how people are.
No, this is probably, I can't think of a section that's harder than the next 6 daf.
Yeah.
It probably is, but I'm not off the top of my head. Maybe Bava Metzia some parts, but this is impossible. Today's not so hard. Tomorrow's not so hard. It gets really hard during the week. But
and it's all different kinds of hard, right? I mean, like the Bava Metzia hard, if you've got a good business sense, so then it's okay. But and then of course the Ervin hard was you needed a math sense and you needed what's the word I'm looking for? Not algebraic, but geometric sense.
Right.
You need a really good geometric sense. So each, but the first 13 dapim of Pesachim were a breeze. Were a breeze. We actually, Miriam, I don't know if you know, but we've changed the time now to 8:15. And
I do during the week. During the week, I do it with our JC, so it doesn't
I know. But
I couldn't do it at
8:15. The reason that I say it is because now we've been doing it from like 8:15 to 9, and we've usually finished by 9 o'clock. So it's been, pretty good from that perspective. Anyway.
Okay. So is that with what's coming, like you don't think you'll be finished by 9 o'clock? Is
yes,
that what
that's
you're saying?
Exactly the point.
Okay. But you do it in 45 minutes?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. These first 13 dapim were definitely 45-minute dapim. But
yeah, I mean it's been fairly fast also for us, but otherwise as a general rule,
I'm not saying that's like, I'm not trying to brag. That was not a bragging kind of thing. I'm doing it 45.
I didn't think that it was.
Even we could do it in 45 minutes.
Okay, Hanan just joined, so I guess we're ready.
We'll still have to confirm. I guess next Motzei Shabbat Hanukkah we'll do same time, or we need a few more minutes for.
I'm good with that.
Yeah, I might be a few minutes. We'll see.
Just to simplify.
Yeah, we should probably just simplify. If I'm a little late, but hopefully we'll be singing. I was thinking of going away, but my wife is again having cold feet, so we'll see. To the country, to Connecticut, but I think we might end up still being here.
Well, if you need me to cover, let me know.
I think I can do it from there like last time. It's no, not sure about outside this time, but we'll see. Okay, we'll get started. We have Hanan. We can start. So we're on the Mishnah on Daf Yud Daled, which is a very good place to be. And this is the last, our Gemara puts it all together, these last two Mishnayot in the first parak. We'll see how they're connected, right? So if you recall, just to very briefly, I'm going to try to do this simply. Rab David, I guess, asked if we're going to do a introduction, and I will do an introduction, but the bottom line is that our Gemara is going to, in the next 4 or 5 daf, really 6 daf, go through many concepts, complicated concepts in Tum'ah, and how things are tameh, how Tum'ah is transmitted. I would say that if you are not that familiar, though I think everyone on this call is pretty familiar, but if you are a novice, you'll think they're pretty arbitrary. They're not arbitrary. If you read the Chumash, you realize there are many psukim that talk about Tum'ah and Tara in the Chumash, and they're not always consistent with each other, right? And there are Gemarot that are dispersed throughout Shas to try to reconcile that. Because we have no Gemara on Seder Tarot except for Nida, that really we have to find these sugyas elsewhere. And this is one of the principal ones that we deal with, one of the really complicated concepts, which we're not going to get to today yet. Well, we'll get to it a little bit, which is about Tum'ah of liquids, because liquids have their own category, midrabanan, midoraita. It gets very complicated. But the reason that we're starting this Mishnah, just to go back for a second, is that our last Mishnah ended off with this discussion about there was a chala, we said, right, of the Todah. So the carbon Todah had 40 chalot. One of them, they would put it on the Gaga Itztaba, on the roof, and they would look and see, that would tell them on Erev Pesach when you can eat chametz, when you can toleh, meaning when you don't burn it, or so you do not eat, but you don't have to get rid of it, and when you get rid of it. And so we'll get back to that in a little bit. Before we get there, so I guess the real brief introduction of Tum'ah is that if you recall, in the Torah, there are many, I think we talked about this last week for some reason, 2 weeks ago. There are many things that are tameh. We talked about the sheretz, I think it was last week, right? That can be an av hatumah.
It's
right?
only a dead sheretz, not a live sheretz.
Only a dead sheretz. Okay, so not a live sheretz. Hanan corrected me. Not only a dead sheretz. We were talking about it last week in a whole different context. The context was going into the Beit HaMikdash, right? That's a little bit of a different context. But anything that's an av hatumah. Now remember, many things can be an av hatumah. A person can be an av hatumah, a zav, a zava, those kind of things. A sheretz that's dead, a nevela in some contexts. Many things can become av hatumah, right? However, if an av hatumah has the capability of being mitameh another level, and that's called a rishon l'tumah. That's a little bit confusing because the av doesn't get counted in this thing, right? The av is level 0, the rishon is level 1, even though there's 2 levels there. In general, a rishon l'tumah, again, there are many details we're going to see in this Gemara, in these pages. A rishon l'tumah can be mitameh a sheni, a second level, but only certain things, right? So for example, food in general, and again, we're going to see many nuances here, cannot be mitameh a second level. Food can only be 1 level with exceptions. We'll get to the exceptions. But we learned that, and Rashi quotes the pasuk here, but that ochel in general is tameh, but it can't be mitameh. It can't make something else tameh if it's a rishon, right? Now, there are some ochels that can be an avatumah, but we'll get there. But in general, let's say a person touches let me give an example, touches a object that touched a dead body, right? So that object is an avatumah. The person is a rishon l'tumah. If that person touches food, that food becomes a sheni l'tumah. And in chulin, meaning outside of the Beit HaMikdash and outside of truma, that's where it stops, right? So it only goes to second level. We have an additional level in truma, that if a truma touches a sheni l'tumah, the truma becomes pasul, it becomes a shlishi l'tumah. And again, a shlishi in truma is where it stops. So if that then touches something else, it can't transmit any tumah. And in kachim, so karbanot, things like that, there's a 4th level. There's revi'i l'tumah. So a shlishi can make revi'i. Now, that's, again, there's machlok. We're going to see, according to Rabbi Akiva, there might be a chamishi, but this is the general outline. And that is all min haTorah. It's all midoraita. And we're going to learn it in the next few dapim from Psukim. Now, I'm very vague here because it's not, what I said is midoraita is not always true about all objects. Not all objects can pass on tumah. What in general from terminology, we call something tameh if it is both tameh itself and it can make something else tameh. But if it's the final level of tumah, meaning it is tameh, but it cannot pass on tumah, it's called pasul, right? So it's itself not okay, but it can't pass that on. And so a sheni, second level in chulin, or shlishi in truma, revi in hektish, and kachim are all called pasul, but not necessarily tameh. And we're going to mix and match all this terminology. There are a couple other details that are very important, and we'll get to them in the Gemara today and then in the dapim coming forward. But one that's key to remember is that a mate itself, right, the dead body, is not an avatuma, it's avi avotatuma, right? It is again, +1 kind of, if you want to look at it in the other number scale. Someone or something that touches a mate becomes an avatuma. And then that person or thing that touches the next level, that becomes a rishon of the tumah. Okay? So that's how we view these categories.
Somebody's in an ohel with a dead body, then they're an av or a rishon.
They're an av. They're an avatuma. That's so ohel for that function is like you're touching the dead body. Okay. Again, there's many nuances.
That's
But
okay.
that's where we're going to start. Okay. So says our Mishnah the following interesting halacha. I think I did enough introduction. Okay. Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim Omer. The Chanina Skana Kohanim we know was a very early Tana, and in fact, Skana Kohanim meant he was an assistant. He was the pinch hitter, the vice Kohen Gadol maybe. There might have been several Skanim, we don't know for sure. But Rabbi Chanina said, Mimehem Kohanim. In the days that I worked with the Kohanim, or maybe historically, all the days of the Kohanim, lo nimneu. They didn't stop. It's a double negative, meaning they did, right? So they didn't prevent themselves from doing the following, meaning they did the following. They were lisrof et habasar. They would burn, if you had meat from a carbon, that was nitma bivlad hatuma. It became tameh from a vlad hatuma. Now we think now, though we're going to correct this in the Gemara, that a vlad hatuma is what's called a rishon l'tuma, right? It's the av is the father, the vlad is the rishon. So let's say some meat touched the rishon. That meat, in my mind, would be a sheni l'tuma. Okay, they did not, and then you have to burn it. You can't eat meat, of course, that's tameh, right? You have to get rid of it. But they would not hold back from burning that im habasar shnitma ba'avatuma with another piece of meat that touched an avatuma, and therefore that other piece of meat is presumably a rishon. So they would not hold back from burning meat that's a sheni with meat that's a rishon, even though you're adding tuma to that meat. Now the Gemara is going to ask, I'll just speak it out, we're going to learn in a minute, that what are you adding, right? If you take a sheni and it touches a rishon, the sheni becomes a sheni again. So you didn't add any tuma to that meat that was a sheni. Stop me if this is not clear, because it's going to get more confusing, I promise. So the Gemara is going to say that the sheni is really a shlishi, right? So what Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim is telling you is that if you have meat that's third level and meat that's first level, if the meat that's shlishi touches the rishon, it becomes a sheni. So by burning them together, you're increasing the level of tumah on that meat from shlishi to sheni, but still that's not a problem. They didn't mind. Even though you're doing that, the rabbi said it's okay, you're burning them, you're getting rid of them anyways, no one's eating it, what's the problem? Just burn them together. Okay, that's how the Gemara is going to at least initially conclude. That's Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim. Hosef Rabbi Akiva. Now Rabbi Akiva added to that, and again we'll see what he's adding. V'omer, he said, Mimehem shel Kohanim, in all the days of the Kohanim, lo nimneu, they again, the double negative, they didn't hold back, meaning they did, hadlik et hashemen shenifsal b'tful yom, they didn't hold back from lighting shemen that was pasul with the tful yom. So now tful yom that touches something, in general, tful yom cannot make chulin tameh, right? A tful yom is considered the equivalent to what I just said was a sheni, a pasul, right? A tful yom is just to be clear, a tful yom is someone who, let's say a zava or yoledet, who brings a karban, right? And they go to the mikvah and they have to wait till the end of some period, right? Well, anyways, maybe not karban, I'll leave that one out. They have to wait till some period, but there's nothing else. They are tameh, they can't go into the Beit HaMikdash, for example, but they can't give over. They don't pass over tuma. So essentially, it's a sheni. You have the shemen that was nifsal b'tful yom. So let's say that the shemen becomes a shlishi. They would not hold back from burning that shemen in a ner, in a candle, in a candle. What do you call it there? A candelabra, let's say, right? Shenitzma b'tamei that touched the tamei mate. Remember, tamei mate is a av hatuma. If you touch a tamei mate, the ner becomes a rishon. So this is a third level with the first level. Afal pi shemosifin tuma tumato. Okay. Now you're going to ask, because the way I explain this is the same as Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim, right? That it's a level 3 and a level 1. Have I lost everyone yet? I'm trying not to.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So the Gemara will ask that question, and the Gemara will explain what all that means. But now we get back to Pesach. Well, maybe not. Amar Rabbi Meir, says Rabbi Meir, the third part of our Mishnah, mi divreihem lamadnu, from their words we learn, shesarfin trumat tahora im tatmea b'Pesach. That since, now we're going to see in the Gemara who we learned this from, but let's just say, since Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim said that you can burn something that's third level tuma with first level tuma, even though you're making it more tameh, because since you're burning them all, you're getting rid of it, we didn't mind that. Therefore, on Erev Pesach, you can burn truma that's tahar with truma that's tameh, even though you're going to make the truma that's tahar tameh by touching the other truma. But since it's all chametz, you're burning it all. The Chachamim did not mind if you burn it all together and add a little bit of tuma. Okay. Again, we're not going. It's not what it's really going to mean at the end, but that's how we think it means right now. Amar Rabbi Yossi said, Rabbi Yossi, Enohi Hamida. I disagree. That's not right, and we'll see why. Rabbi Yossi disagrees with Rabbi Meir. And finally, says someone, Modim Rabbi Eliezer of Rabbi Yeshua. Okay, we haven't mentioned who these people are, but all of a sudden, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua both agree. Shesarfin zula atzmo v'zula atzmo. So presumably this is Rabbi Yossi speaking. They agree that you should burn each one independently, meaning if you have cake that's truma tahora and cake that's truma tameir, and you got to burn it before Pesach, you should burn them each in their own pile so they don't touch each other. Alma nechliku. Where do Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua disagree? Al hatfluya v'al hatmeya. Let's say you have truma that's tfluya. Tfluya means that it's safek. You don't know if it's tamei or not tamei, meaning it might have touched something, it might not have touched something. You just don't know. You obviously can't eat it because it might be tamei. You got to burn it. And you have another pile of truma that's for sure tamei. There, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Tisaref Zulatzmo V'Zulatzmo, burn each pile independently because one might be tahar and one might not be, or one for sure is not. And Rabbi Yeshua says Shtem Kachat, you could do two together. But you could obviously tell that it's going to take us many days to unpack this Mishnah, as we would say now. It's going to take us till next Shabbos, till the end of the parak. Okay? And it's going to be a busy week for you. So let's start from the top. Says the Gemara, Michti. First of all, let's try to understand Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim. Look, Basar shenitma bevlada tuma. If you have a vlada tuma, which again, vlada tuma is a rishon, first level tuma, and you have meat that touches that, that becomes maihavi sheni. That should become a sheni tuma, right? So now, said Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim, they would burn that with something which was a rishon tuma. When you burn it together with meat that is tamei from an avatuma, meaning it's a rishon l'tuma, my havi, what does it become then? It becomes a sheni, right? Remember, if you always go down one level of tuma. So if the meat becomes a sheni, so sheni v'sheni havi, right? It was a sheni when you started. You burned it with a rishon, so you made it a sheni. So my mosiflo tuma, tuma toika. What are you adding? You haven't added a level of tuma to it. You've burnt it with something and given it the same level of tuma. So what's the chiddush of Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim? What do the words mean? You understand?
Why did it become a sheni? Because it touched the rishon?
Yeah.
Okay, because you put it together.
Because you burned it together.
Okay.
Says the Gemara, what I told you in the Mishnah. I'm Rav Yehuda, obviously it has to mean hacha bivlad vladaskin. It doesn't mean that the meat touched a vlada tuma, so the meat is a sheni. It means the meat touched a vlada tuma, touched a grandson of tuma, which is another way to say second generation, right? So the meat touched a second level. The meat itself now becomes third level. Thank you. You burn it, says Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim, with something that's first level. Even though you're making it now second level, so you're adding its tuma, that's okay. That was fine. And that's what the Gemara says. The havile shlishi, the meat that you're burning is a third level, because savar, Rabbi Chanina holds shlishi mutar lasoto sheni. you're allowed to make it into a sheni, even though you usually cannot make something tameh. You're in this case, it's not clear exactly why, but let's say either because you're burning it to destroy it anyway, so it doesn't matter, or because there's really no practical difference between a 3 and a 2, right? A shlishi is mitameh, a sheni is mitameh. So who really cares so much? Okay, so that's what you're allowed to do. So that is how you understand our mission. Ask the Gemara 1 second. We have a principle, which I didn't give you in the introduction, but if you're going to write principles now, this is an important principle in Taharot. We have a clear principle that ochel, food, cannot be metame another food. So what's the problem to begin with? You're burning meat that's a shlishi with meat that's a rishon, and Rabbi Chanina Skanakonim saying even though it becomes a sheni, that's not a problem. It doesn't become a sheni because food is not metame other food. Only people are metame food, or clothing, or objects. But food is not metame food. How do I know that? Tanya, you might have thought, says this is an important braita. Yachal yehe ochel metame ochel. You probably woke up this morning thinking, yeah, sure. Why can't food be metame other food? So Tal Maloma, the pasuk says, and this pasuk is talking about tumah. V'chiyite mayim al zera, right? If you put water on seeds, and then nafal minivlatan alav, and then a nivela falls, let's just say we mean that, falls onto those zera, onto those seeds, then tamei, it doesn't say that, it says tamei hu. There's an extra word hu over here. It is tamei, right? So now this is another halacha, which we've discussed many times, which is that most things, with the exception of liquids, are not susceptible to tumah unless they are first machshir, unless they first were touched by liquid, right? And there's a whole masechet machshirin that we can learn more about this. But in general, if you have a container of grain, let's just say, or seeds, let's say, they're not susceptible to tumah. Even if something tamei touches them, they don't become tamei unless they are first machshir. First, they are first cleared to do that first by liquid falling on them, and that's a pasuk. This is a pasuk right here. Yitein mayim al zera. Once water goes on zera, and then nafal minivlatan alav, then those seeds become tamehu. But we're learning from the word hu is that those food stuffs become tamei, right? But they cannot make other food tamei. Who, says the Gemara, or the Braita, hu tamei, vein osek yotze bo tamei. They would not make another food tamei. So midaraita, food does not transmit tumah, which is shocking, right? So that only if the food will never make more food tamei. In which case, what is Rabbi Chanina Skanakonim's chiddush in our Mishnah? That you took a piece of meat that was a shlishi and you burned it with a piece of meat that was a rishon. So what? There's no tumah between pieces of meat. So why would that be a problem anyways? Okay, that's the Gemara's question. This is just a really great way to learn a lot of principles of tumah. Okay, you got a question, James?
Yeah, the law about liquid, that only applies between two food substances, right?
What liquid? Wait, liquid.
The law that it has to be wet.
It only applies to ochel. Yeah, it only applies to food.
If a person
Not to
touches
people,
it,
for example.
if a person touches it, it could be dry.
No, it applies to all food. No, food is not mikabel to, so let me give you, here's the issue. And again, we don't want to get too deep into this. If food is growing in the ground, it's not mikabel tumah, right? If a person is tamei and they touch a tree with an apple on it, the apple's not tamei. So there's a certain cutoff between when the apple becomes tamei, and we learn from the pasuk that it's only after water has been poured over, or some liquid, either it's rained on it or you poured water on it, because we don't consider it to be something edible or a food stuff until that happens.
If I had a bowl of apples on my table and I was ava truma and I touched them, they would not become truma?
Correct, presumably. There are some exceptions where if you bring it into your house, even without hechsher, that you might be indicating that you want to eat it that way. But yes, presumably they would not be tamei until, again, let's just say they're on the roof. It'll be easier than in the house, right? You pick a bushel of apples, they're on your roof. They're not susceptible to tumah until they get wet. And if it rains, they are. So half of Masechet Machshir, not half, but a lot of it is about what happens when it rains and et cetera, et cetera. What if it's dirty water? What if it's clean water? All these kind of questions. Not for tonight. But says the Gemara now, if you recall, this question of the Torah saying that ochel is not mitame ochel is a braita which I just read to you, right? But there's many Amoraim who disagree about when this applies. And we're about to see that there are three opinions. There's one opinion that this is only true that ein ochel matame ochel by chula, by things that are not hektish and not truma. But that for hektish and truma, ochel is matame ochel, which would solve all our problems, right? Because Rabbi Chanina Skanakonim is talking about hektish, right? And so if that's your opinion, then our Mishnah makes a lot of sense, because then a shlishi could be matame rishon, and the chiddush is that we don't mind, right? So that's what we're about to say. Hanicha. So our Mishnah makes sense according to Abaya, the Amar lo shanu ela b'chula. Abaya says that this principle that one food cannot be matame another food is only true about regular chulin, meaning not hektish, not truma. Avo betruma v'kachim oseki yotzego. That by truma and kachim, one food can make tameh another food, right? In which case, our Mishnah makes a lot of sense. Because Rabbi Chanina Skanakonim is saying, even though one piece of meat is shlishi and one piece of meat is rishon, and when you put them together, the shlishi will become a sheni, the chachamim did not mind and they let you burn it together. So there's an innovation, right? You're being mosif tuma al tumato. And furthermore, says the Gemara, according to Rav Ada bar Ava, Mishmei de Rava, Nami, because he said, Amar lo shanu ela chulin v'truma, that you can't pass on tuma from one food to another food, both by chulin and by truma. Aval bekachim oseki yotzeben. But by kachim you can, then shapir. Then our Mishnah makes a lot of sense. Rabbi Chanina Skanakonim was telling us an interesting innovation. Ela l'Ravina Mishmei de Rava, but according to Ravina, in the name of Rava, the Amar who said, Mikra malei diber katuv, that the pasuk is, Rashi understands this means that it's unequivocal. Mikra malei, it's complete. There's no exceptions. That this principle of the pasuk is true about everything. That food does not mitame other food. Lo shna chulen, lo shna truma, lo shna kachim, eino oseki yotzebo, my ikelamemer. What are you going to explain? How are you going to explain our Mishnah? What was the innovation of Rabbi Chanina Skanakonim, the chiddush, that you can burn a shlishi with the rishon, and even though you're being mosif tuma al tumato, you're not being mosif tuma al tumato. There is no tuma. Says Gemara, you're right. But we made the assumption that whenever you have some meat, you also have some liquid on top of it, right? You just slaughtered an animal, you just washed it off. There's probably some water on top of the meat.
Or blood.
Sorry?
Or blood.
Or blood, liquid. I'll say liquid, right? And so whenever the avatuma touched that meat, it also presumably touched the liquid. And so the meat is a rishon, but the liquid on top of the meat is also a rishon, if it touched it, not because it's touching the meat, right? And so since the liquid is a rishon, the liquid can be matame ochel, right? So when we said ochel is not matame ochel, we meant a solid food is not matame another solid food. But liquid would presumably be mitame. And so we left out part of the Mishnah. Hacha b'mayaskinan, says the Gemara, Di'ika mashkin bahade basar. You have liquid on top of the meat. And the liquid is the same status as the meat. The liquid's also a rishon. And therefore, when you burn a piece of meat that's a rishon with a piece of meat that's a shlishi, the liquid on the piece of meat that's a rishon will be mitame, the piece of meat that's a shlishi, to make it into a sheni. Okay? It'll be tameh because of the liquid. That's ridiculous. Our Mishnah didn't say that. Instead of saying in our Mishnah that you can burn a meat that's shlishi with meat that's rishon, we should have said ima basar v'mashkin, right? Where the words ima basar v'mashkin mibayle. Ella, forget about it. That's not a good answer. But it is an important interlude, because now you understand that when we say ein ochel matame ochel, we're not talking about liquids, right? We're talking only about solid food, just to be clear. But we're dismissing that, because that's really not a clear reading of our Mishnah. Ella, what you have to say, according to that opinion of Rava, right? Ravina said in the name of Rava, is that nehei de'ein mitame ochel midoraita midorabanan miyam mitame. That it's true. The pasuk says that ochel is not mitame ochel, and according to Ravina in the name of Rava, that's true about all types of tumah. So burning a shlishi with a rishon should never be a problem, because it won't add tumah. But that's only midoraita. Midorabanan, they added tumah. And therefore, what Rabbi Chanina Skanakonim is telling you is that even though midorabanan, you're going to add tumah because you're burning a shlishi with a rishon, they didn't mind, and the Rabbanan didn't make a gzeira in that case. But according to this understanding, our Mishnah is only going about Tumah Midrabanan. Okay? So we're all good. We understand many things.
So the other position would be you'd have to burn them separately? Is that?
No. I mean, according to Ravina,
if you couldn't do it together, you'd have to do it separately.
Right. But so you're asking, would you be, let's say there was Tumah Midoraita, you're saying, right?
Right. Or let's say you hold a different way or something. Then
Well, the next case, Rabbi Akiva's case, which we're talking about not two foods, right? You're talking about an air and oil. So that's not food and food. That's food and liquid, food and kli,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, so that might be what the chiddush is of Rabbi Akiva, according to this opinion. But according to the first two opinions, right, Abaya and who's the second one? Ravada bar Ava, right, which made the Rava. Sorry, Abaya and Ravada bar Ava. There is no tuma even midoraita. There is tuma, and Rabbi Chanina's Kanakonim is telling you that even though midoraita there's a level of tuma, you're still allowed to burn them together.
Yeah, I mean you're only adding to get rid of it easier. That's
Say that again.
easier to get rid of, right? To make one big bonfire.
Yeah, but we don't want you. Okay, yeah. Continues the Gemara. Hosef Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva then added on the next case, and he said, "Mimeyem shel kohanim lo nimnu milahadlik shemen." That was tamei from a tful yom, which I told you is a shlishi, with a ner that was tamei from tumat meit, which is a rishon, right? So that's this more michti. Again, let's analyze this. Shemen shenifsal b'tful yom I have a. What is oil that touched a tful yom? That's a shlishi. Right, a ner that touched a tumat mate. The mate is tumat mate is a avatuma. The ner is a rishon. If you burn a rishon with a shlishi, you're making it a sheni. My avi sheni. So my kamash malan. What's the chiddush of Rabbi Akiva? Shlishi mutar lasoto sheni. That you're allowed to make a shlishi into a sheni. Hainu hach. That's the exact same thing Rabbi Chanias Kanakonim just said. Hanan's confused.
To make a shlishi into a sheni?
That's what you do. If you take a shlishi and a rishon and you burn them together, the shlishi becomes a sheni.
How could it become less tameh?
No, you're higher tuma. Oh, so we got to start over. Rishon is the higher level of tuma.
No, I know that. No, I know that.
So the point is, you're taking a shlishi that's a lower level of tuma,
Oh, okay.
Burning
It
it
touches
with
the
a
rishon.
and making it a sheni.
Okay, I get it. All right.
So now that's okay. It's very confusing. We got to clarify.
You go down.
Right. That's why. Sorry, that was the introduction.
It's less tameh.
It's very confusing. Well, we give
So it
you.
went down and now it's going back up.
That's the problem, right? Third degree to second degree. Okay, but third degree burns are worse than second degree.
Right.
Okay. Very confusing here.
But it got to third and now it's going back up. It's coming, it got less and now it's becoming more tameh.
Well, it doesn't. So let me be very clear. Objects don't become less tummy, right? It's a shlishi because it touched the sheni. It touched its full yom,
Right.
but the tumah went down.
The tumah went down.
So according to Rabbi Akiva, the way I just read it, Rabbi Akiva is saying you can burn something that's a shlishi with something that's a rishon, even though you're going to make that shlishi into a more tameh by making it into a sheni. Ask the Gemara. That's exactly what Rabbi Chanias Kanakonim said. Okay. Now I just want to add, even though I'm afraid this is going to be confusing. Tosfot points out that what I just told you before, according to Rava, would get rid of this whole question. Because if you think Rabbi Chanias Kanakonim was only talking about Tumah Midrabanan, then it could be all Rabbi Akiva is adding is Tumah Doraita, right? So Tosfot is of the opinion that this question doesn't make any sense if you're holding that way. But the Gemara is asking according to the other people, that Rabbi Chanias Kanakonim was talking about Tumah Doraita. He said that by Kadshim, you can burn a shlishi with a rishon. And Rabbi Akiva is saying by Truma, well, we don't know that yet. Rabbi Akiva is saying that by some other Tumah, you can burn a shlishi with a rishon. It's the same thing. What's the finish? Hainu hach, right? It's the same thing. Rabbi Yehuda, hacha b'ner shomatechet askinan. Oh, we got a whole new detail here. Add this one to the list. You're talking about a candelabra, which of course is often made out of metal. Well, not always, right? We learned Masechet Shabbat, and you can make a ner out of, mostly they made a ner out of cheres, out of clay, right? Earthenware or whatever. But it's talking about a metal kli, right? Now, metal has a whole new rule. The Rachmana Amar, there's a very, very unusual pasuk. The pasuk says, I'm going to read the whole pasuk because I got it here. It says, Chol asher, this is not what our Gemara says. I'm going to quote, I'll read the whole pasuk. It says, Kol asher yigal pnei hasadeh, v'chalal cherem. Anyone who touches in the field in a chalal usually means a corpse, right? A halal cherev means a corpse that was killed by a sword, right? Which is usually the way you kill a corpse, I guess. You kill a person, you make it a corpse, right? O b'meit, it continues, or a dead person. O be'etzem adam, or a bone. O be'kever, or a grave. Yitma shivat yamim. You become tamei for 7 days. This is a person who touches a dead body, right? But the language is bizarre. Why does it say chalal cherev? Why does it say a corpse that was killed by a sword? Says the Gemara, you've had this 100 times before, I think. Cherev harehu kechalal. This is telling you a tremendous innovation that only applies by tumat meit. And that is that the sword that you kill the person with, now almost everyone understands, not everyone, everyone understands, it doesn't mean a sword that you kill a person with. It means a object that's metal that made, now some people understand it means you could kill a person with it, but presumably not. Any object that's like a sword is like the dead body. Meaning, right, I told you in the introduction that Tumah always goes down one level. That anything that gets Tumah from something else is the next level down. If you touch an Ava Tumah, you become a Rishon. If you touch a dead body, which is Avi Avota Tumah, you become an Ava Tumah. If you touch a Sheni, you become a Shlishi. This is the exception. A piece of metal that touches a Tomei mate has the same status as the thing it touches. And so a piece of metal that touches a dead body is Tomei like a dead body. It has the level of Avi Avota Tumah. And so if you touch the sword that killed the person, it doesn't have to kill the person. A sword that touched the dead person, it's like touching a dead person. Okay? And the same thing is true one level down.
Does that apply to the ohel? If the sword was in a house, then
Then the sword, yeah, no, the sword also becomes tamei. Like
no, if the sword was in the house, not the dead body, just the sword.
the sword also gets Avi Avota Tumah.
For everything in the house would be, in the ohel would be tamei. But
Oh, you're asking? Yes. The short answer is yes.
Yeah.
The sword can transmit Tumah through Ohel. Tumah to mate. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the point now is that your candelabra, which is an Av, your candelabra is a Rishon, right? But again, I think I lost everyone here. You have oil that's a Shlishi. You have a candelabra that's a Rishon. If the Shlishi touches the candelabra, since it is Tamei mate and it's metal, the oil becomes a Rishon, not a Sheni. And Rabbi Akiva's Chiddush is that even though you're turning a Shlishi into a Rishon, all Rabbi Chanina's Kanakonim said you could do is turn a Shlishi into a Sheni. Says Rabbi Akiva, I'm adding on that you could turn a Shlishi even into a Rishon, right? So therefore, Havile Avatuma, the candelabra itself is an Avatuma, because Savar Shlishi Mutar Vasoto Rishon. And he holds, Rabbi Akiva is adding that you can make a Shlishi, which is the oil, into a Rishon, and that's also not a problem. Okay? James, you got it? You got it enough? You want to keep going?
The metal is an Av, or the metal is an Av of Av?
The metal is, the Mishnah said that the Ner touched an Avatuma. So you and I reading Mishnah assume that the Ner was
The
a
metal
Rishon.
didn't touch a dead body, the metal touched an Avatuma.
Correct. So I assume that the Ner was a Rishon, but says your Gemara, no, the Ner is an Av. What the oil that touches the Ner does go down one level, right? It's only metal that retains it. The oil touches it, it goes down one level from an Av to a Rishon. But that's a Chiddush that Rabbi Chanina Kanakonim didn't tell us. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Why did Rabbi Yehuda feel like you have to say our mission is only talking about Ner Shel Matechet? Why can't it be talking about Ner Shel Cheres? Why can't it be talking about even Ner Shel Cheres? Umay Hosif. So our question was, if the Ner was Cheres and it was a Rishon, so what's the Chiddush of Rabbi Akiva? It's a Shlishi to a Rishon. That's what Rabbi Chanina Kanakonim said. It was a third level to a first level, right? Says more, but maybe the Chiddush is that there's a difference between Kachim and Truma. Because remember, a Shlishi of Kachim can still make a Revi. It can still make a fourth level. But a Shlishi of Truma is the end, right? You can't go beyond the Shlishi. So maybe the Chiddush was that going from a Shlishi of Kachim to a Sheni of Kachim is no big deal, right? It's still Tamei. It still makes other things Tamei. But going from a Shlishi of Truma to a Sheni of Truma is a big deal. Because a Shlishi of Truma was Tamei, but it can't pass on Truma. Once you make that a Sheni, you elevated it so that now not only is it Tamei, but it can make other things Tamei. So maybe there would be a question, maybe there would be a concern about making a Shlishi of Truma into a Sheni of Truma. And Rabbi Akiva is talking about truma. Says Gemara, maybe it's talking about ner shel cheres. Well, my hosif, what are you adding on? Hatam by kachim tamei v'tamei. Third level is tamei, meaning it's tamei and it makes other things tamei, as is a first level. Ilohacha pasul v'tamei. Here, the third level truma is only pasul. It's not tamei because it can't make other things tamei. So maybe that's all he was saying. You don't have to tell me it's talking about metal. Rava, you're right, but there was a different problem. Matniting shite. Our Mishnah has a problem in terms of what it's meaning. It invites difficulty because my area, the Tani Nershin Tamei b'Tamei mate. Why did our Mishnah, according to Rabbi Akiva, say a ner that's Tamei b'Tumat mate? Why do we care? Why do you say Nershin Tamei b'Ava Tuma? Right? It should be any Ava Tuma. Why do you say specifically Tumat mate? Why not any type? Like, why not be generic? Why not be general? Why be specific? It must be, says the Gemara, says Rav Yehuda, that the difference, the reason we said Tamei mate is because, as I just told you, like Tumat mate, there's a unique halacha that metal doesn't go down one level of Tumat. That's only true about Tumat mate. It's not true about any other kinds of Tumat. And therefore, the fact that our Mishnah said specifically Tumat mate, he concluded is telling you this chiddush about the ner, which was metal, right? That it's my era, the Tani Nershin Tuma Tumah mate, Nitli Tuma Tuma Sheretz, or Rashi understands it means any other Tuma. Ela Ezehu Davar Shechaluka Tumato Bein Tumat Mate the Sheretz. Where would it matter? Right? Usually, if you're an Ava Tuma, you're an Ava Tuma. There's no difference. Every Ava Tuma is the same. It is every Ava Tuma, not with obviously with exceptions, but in general, every Ava Tuma goes down one level. The only exception, not the only, but one big exception is Tumat mate, where if it's metal, it doesn't go down one level, it retains the same level of Tumah, and that's why we taught Tumat mate, Haviomer Zematechet. Their metal is what matters, and that's why we said it's a candelabra that's made out of metal. Now, says Rava, while we're on the topic, we haven't got yet to the second part of our Mishnah, which is the meat. But says Rava, anyone who's been following from home can make the following conclusion. Shma mina, you clearly can see, all of you would have said this yourself, that Kasava Rabbi Akiva, that Rabbi Akiva holds, Tumat mashkin l'tamei acherim deoraita. There is a big debate, which will be part of our next week ahead of us, which is what is the status of Tumat mashkin, okay? Can liquids themselves, now we're talking here not about, there obviously are specific liquids that could be mitameh, like rok of a zav, right, which we've talked about, right? But other liquids, right? Let's say a person who's avatuma touches a cup of coffee, let's just say. Can that liquid pass on tuma, right? And this is a big machloket, whether a mashkin can ever be mitameh anything else. There's an opinion that says there's no tuma from liquids, except for the very specific ones in the Torah. But general liquids are not mitameh at all. Midoraita. Midorabanan, they're tameh everything, which we talked about in Shabbos, right? But we'll get back to that. But midoraita, there's an opinion that says liquids never pass on tumah. Says the Gemara, you see from here that Rabbi Akiva disagrees with that. And Rabbi Akiva holds that tumat mashkin l'tamei achirim is do'oraita. How do you see that? Because remember, what was Rabbi Akiva talking about in our Mishnah? Oil, which is a liquid, right? And Isa Kedaydach Durabanan, if Rabbi Akiva was of the opinion, which again is a machloket tanaim, which we're going to get to, that all liquids only pass on tuma midrabanan, not midoraita, then let's go back to our Mishnah. Hai ner maika mahani lahai shemen. What would the ner be doing to the shemen, anyways? Right? The shemen we told you is a shlishi. The ner is a rishon, or maybe even an av. Doesn't matter. So what's going to happen when you put the shemen in the ner? You're going to make it either a sheni or a rishon. Now, I told you before that a sheni or a rishon can then pass on tuma. So you're going from a level of psul to a level of tuma, which is going up. But if you hold that all liquids are always pasul, meaning they never can make something else tameh, you're not adding anything, right? By definition. The isagadaitach dirabanan, that midoraita, all liquids are not mitameh other things. Michli. Hi ner maika mahani lahai shemen. Gufa, if your question is that the ner is going to make the shemen pasul, it's already pasul. A pasul v'kai. It's already tameh. So therefore, you see clearly from here, the Rabbi Akiva holds that liquids can be matami other things midoraita, And that's why Rabbi Akiva has to say, you would have thought you can't burn the shemen with a avatuma or rishon latuma because you're adding tuma to it. They don't mind, that's okay. So that's a proof that Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion that a mashkin can be mitameh midoraita. Doesn't Rabbi Mai? I can't, not necessarily. Maybe all Rabbi Akiva is saying in the Mishnah is dimla tameh achirim midrabanan. Maybe all Rabbi Akiva is talking about is tumat drabanan. Rabbi Akiva is saying that although putting a shlishi into a rishon will make it a sheni, or if you put it with an avatum, it makes it a rishon, and it will then be mitame other things midrabanan. Although midaraita will never be mitame more than what it already is. Maybe that's all Rabbi Akiva was saying. Says the Gemara, one final for today. Halacha, midrabanan. Then the whole Mishnah makes no sense. Because my area ba'avatuma, you don't have to talk about an avatuma. Afila rishon v'sheni nami tchila have. If you recall, we have a rule. You may recall. You should recall. We learned in Shabbos, but you might have forgotten. But there's a Mishnah which says Ditznan kol haposel et truma. Anything that they remember, they made a gzera about like many things that are posel truma. Anything that's posel truma, right, is mitame mashkin liot tchila. They are mitame liquids that the liquids become tchila, meaning beginning, which means a rishon. That the liquids become, no matter what, anything that's mitame truma. So, for example, a sheni, right, which is mitame truma. If it touches a liquid, the liquid becomes a rishon l'tuma. It goes back to the beginning, and that's midrabanan, right? Chutz mi tful yom. The one exception is tful yom. So that essentially midrabanan, any liquid that touches something that can make it tameh, right, automatically becomes a rishon l'tuma. It doesn't matter. And that was a gzera. We learned about this in Shabbos in detail, that they made this gzera midrabanan because there's some liquids that are tamei av, like roka v'zav, and therefore, that wasn't the reason. The reason was because liquids become tamei without hechsher, right? I told you food needs to have water touch it before, or liquid touch it before it becomes tamei. Liquids do not need that. And because liquids are easier to become tamei, they were makbid and they made a gzera midrabanan that anytime a liquid is tamei, it becomes a rishon l'tuma, okay? And it can be mitame other things. And so therefore, if we were talking, I'll take you a step back, and again, I'm happy to do this again, but if Rabbi Akiva was talking about tuma of a liquid midrabanan, there would be no need to say that the oil touched an avatuma or touched a rishon l'tuma. Because even if the oil touched a sheni l'tuma, it would become a rishon. Because with liquid, midrabanan, you always become a rishon. And so it must be that Rabbi Akiva was talking about a level of deoraita. And since Rabbi Akiva had to be talking about a level of deoraita, you can prove from our Mishnah that Rabbi Akiva holds that a liquid is mitame other things midoraita. Because otherwise, going from a shlishi to a sheni wouldn't matter. And so Shema Mina, in fact, the Gemara says it is a proof. Shema Mina deoraitahi. You can in fact conclude from our Mishnah that Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion that a liquid passes on tuma midoraita like a food, like everything else. And so a liquid that's a sheni will make truma into a shlishi, right? And will make kachim into a shlishi. And tuma and liquid that's a shlishi can make kachim into a revi.
This oil that was a shlishi,
Yeah.
that was not kochim or truma, was it?
It was truma. No, it had to be truma.
Oh, it had to be truma. Oh.
Right. Remember, what food that's a shlishi is there's no such thing as food that's a shlishi.
Okay.
If you take chulin and you make it a shlishi, it's tahar.
So it must have touched a sheni.
A tful yom.
What's that?
It touched the tful yom.
Okay. Who's
That's the person who had needed to go to the mikvah to become tahar. Went to the mikvah and they were waiting for nightfall to become tahar.
Okay.
Or
It
you're waiting for 80 days, but yeah.
It went from tahor to being a shlishi.
Correct. It was beautiful, happy picture of oil, and it was touched by a person who's full yom, and then it became a shlishi. So you got to burn it now, right? It's truma. Can't eat it, but you can burn it with a rishon. Okay. Next words in our Mishnah. I hopefully this is really just laying out principles, so we can get complicated later. Finally, our Mishnah said, it's going to get more complicated, I promise you. Amar Rabbi Meir midivreim lamadnu. So Rabbi Meir said, From their words, we learned that on Erev Pesach, you can burn Truma Tahora with Truma that's Tamei. Okay? Now says the Gemara, what the heck are you talking about? Midivrayim Dima. From whose words did you learn that? Does he mean from Rabbi Chanina Kohanim and Rabbi Akiva, who said that you can burn a third level Tuma with the first level Tuma, even though you're adding Tuma to it? Midami, that's not comparable at all. Hatam, Rabbi Chanina Kohanim was talking about Tamei v'Tamei, right? One was the third level Tuma, one was a first level Tuma. So Rabbi Chanina Kohanim, you can burn them together. But Hacha, we're talking about Truma Tehora and Truma Temeya. How could you burn those together, right? Hacha Tahar v'Tamei. We're talking about Truma that's Tahar and Truma that's Tamei. Now remember, I left this out. If it's after 6 hours, they're both Asr Midoraita, right, of chametz. So we're talking here about burning. Remember, we burn before 6 hours, right? So there's an issue, remember, midirabanan of not eating chametz after, say, right before, let's say after the 4th hour, 5th hour, right? So then you burn it, but that's only burning it because it's Asr Midrabanan. So basically you have Truma that's Tahar, but Asr Midrabanan. Truma that's Tamei and Asr Minatora, because it's Tamei. How could you compare those two things? Rabbi Chanina Kohanim said you could burn Tuma with a higher level of Tuma, not Tahora with Tuma, right? Ella Hatam, it's Hacha Tahar v'Tamei. Ella, maybe it's Midivrei Rabbi Akiva. Maybe you learned it from Rabbi Akiva, but same thing. Midami, Hatam, Pasul v'Tamei. When you're talking about Truma, a Shlishi is Pasul, meaning it's Tamei, but can't give over Tuma. And then the Rishon is Tamei. But Hacha, again, it's Tahar v'Tamei. It has nothing to do with the case of Rabbi Akiva. Says Gemara, you're right. Nema Kasav Rabbi Meir, Matnitim ba'ava Tuma de'oraita, Vlada Tuma d'Rabanan. In fact, our whole Mishnah, at least Rabbi Chanina Kohanim maybe, is talking about a Ava Tuma, which is Doraita, a Vlada Tuma, which is only Tamei Midrabanan, right? So for example, a Tuma like liquid, right? So remember I told you liquid can never be Mitamei to anything, to be honest with you. Well, not anything, but liquid that is a, well, let's say ochel. Let's say a food, right? So a food generally does not pass on tuma to a person. But midrabanan, there are cases where it will, let's say. Not to a person necessarily, but to an object. So it's tuma that's not tuma midoraita, it's only tuma midrabanan. And since it's only talking about tuma midrabanan, right? The object itself, so let me get this clear. The shlishi minatora is tahar. Midrabanan, it's tamei, because it touched liquid, let's say. That made it tamei. Says Rabbi Chanina Kohanim, you can burn that third level with a first level that's midoraita, meaning it's tahar midoraita on the third level, tamei midoraita on the first level. You're allowed to do that together. Why? Because it's tamei midrabanan. Now that's similar to our Mishnah, because our Mishnah now you have chametz, right? You have truma, tahar, that's mutar min haTorah, but it's asr midrabanan because Rabbanan added the yisur of chametz. Right? And you're burning it with something which is tamei and therefore asur midoraita. And so since Rabbi Chanina Kohanim permitted you to burn something that's tamei midrabanan with something that's tamei midoraita, we're going to permit you to burn chametz that's asur midrabanan with something that's asur midoraita. And that's the parallel. So says the Gemara, Hacha nema kasaver. You have to say Rabbi Meir holds the matnitim ba'ava tuma deoraita and vlada tuma midrabanan. The midoraita tahor ma'alya. Minatora, this shlishi is in fact tahar. And my midivrayim, when Rabbi Meir says you're allowed to do it from their words, he means midivrei Rabbi Chanina Kohanim. He means from the words of Rabbi Chanina Kohanim, I have learned out that something that is tamei asur midirabanan can be burned with something which is asur midoraita. And the same thing would then be true about truma that is chametz. If it's tahar but asur midrabanan, because we're talking about the 5th hour, you can burn it with truma that's tamei and therefore asur midoraita. And that is the analogy where Rabbi Meir said, from the words of Rabbi Chanina Kohanim, I can learn out that you're allowed to burn truma tahora with truma that's tamei. Okay?
There is no shlishi d'oraita.
There is, but for truma.
That's d'oraita?
There is shlishi midoraita, but shlishi midoraita only happens if you touch something that's a sheni midoraita.
Right.
This shlishi midorabanan touched a sheni that was tahar midoraita and tameh midorabanan. For example, a liquid, right? Remember, I just told you, but we just read this earlier. Rashi uses the case of a liquid, right? So let's say you have a liquid, midorabanan, a liquid that is tahar, no, not tahar, but would not be mitameh. Midorabanan, if the liquid touches something else, it makes it a sheni, right? Because we read the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Kol haposel truma mitami mashkin liyot tchila. Anything that postels truma makes a mashkin a rishon, a first blood. But that's midrabanan. Midoraita, the mashkin is nothing, essentially, or at least a shlishi. Okay? So that liquid touched a kli, which became a sheni, but it's only a sheni midrabanan, right? It's not, there's no midoraita, there's no truma whatsoever, because the rishon couldn't pass on truma, because it was a liquid. So basically, you're taking the chiddush of Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim is you're taking an object that's a shlishi midirabanan, but midoraita it's tahar. Now you can't eat it because it's tamei midirabana, right? So we got to follow those rules. But midoraita it's tahar. Says Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim, you can burn it with something that midoraita is tamei, even though you're basically adding truma midoraita to this thing which doesn't exist. It's all that. The analogy then, according to Rabbi Meir, is to chametz. You're taking an object that midoraita, it's definitely chametz, right? But you're talking about the 5th hour. And midoraita, in the 5th hour, you can eat chametz. You can only stop eating chametz after 6 hours. But the Rabbanan added on that you can eat chametz even earlier, let's say 1 hour, 2 hours, right? We had an argument about that. But whatever time they added, so therefore it's asr midrabanan, you're allowed to burn it with something that's asr midoraita. That is what Rabbi Meir is saying. Let me read 2 more lines just because I think it'll make life easier for everyone. I'll read it again tomorrow though. Says Reish Lakish, 2nd line on Tetvav. Amar Reish Lakish mishum bar kapara. I disagree completely with that. Everything you just said is wrong. Matnitin ba'ava tuma doraita v'ala tuma midoraita. The Mishnah of Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim is talking about tuma doraita as the way we read it initially. This whole idea doesn't make any sense. All Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim was saying is you can burn a shlishi with a rishon or something like that. And it has no relevance to chametz. Chametz of truma tahora and chametz of truma tameya have nothing to do with Rabbi Chanina Skana Kohanim. Rabbi Meir was referring to a whole different opinion. When Rabbi Meir said, my midivreihem, he was talking about a different opinion which we have forgot to mention. He means midivrei Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua. From the words of Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, who we have not mentioned yet, you can learn that you're allowed to burn truma, that's tahora, with truma, that's tameya, on Erev Pesach. And tomorrow, we're going to figure out who this Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, who we keep mentioning, who they really are. That's what we're talking about. Okay, so just the beginning, I hope everyone got all the concepts, and we're going to add on and pull apart some of them, so don't get them too tight. But in the next few dapim.
Don't give us
So,
Sorry?
if anyone is interested, actually there's a shul in Teaneck that is having shiurim every single night this week about Tuma and Tahara. So I'm going to put it out in the Google group so that if you're interested, you can listen.
Okay, great. It will definitely be helpful. It'll be confusing, but helpful, I'm sure. Okay, Shavuot, everyone. See you hopefully tomorrow morning at 7.
Tov.
Shavua Tov. Thank you,
Sure.
Willie.
Yeah,